For millions of years, we just kept moving, under open skies, across shifting continents. Our entire existence was defined by motion. No borders, no walls. And then, suddenly, we stopped. We built walls. We planted crops. Today, we're going to unravel one of the biggest mysteries in human history. Why did we stop walking? And honestly, what did we lose when we did?
Now, I know that sounds a bit crazy, right? Did agriculture actually enslave us? We've all been taught since we were kids that settling down and farming was our greatest victory, the literal dawn of civilization. But what if the exact opposite is true? What if the journey from free-roaming wanderers to settled farmers wasn't about freedom at all, but was actually a carefully designed trap?
Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. The Wandering Era. A journey of millions of years.
To really grasp the scale of this, just take a look at this timeline. 4 million years ago, our ancestors, the Australopithecines, started walking on 2 legs. Over millions of years, Homo habilis and Homo erectus mastered stone tools and fire, but they stayed nomadic. Even we modern humans, Homo sapiens, have been around for roughly 300,000 years. For the vast, vast majority of our history, we just kept moving. Settling down in one place? That is a remarkably recent and, honestly, a pretty terrifying experiment. Think about it. For 99% of human history, being human meant being completely free. During the Paleolithic era, people lived without any boundaries. We hunted, we foraged, we moved with the seasons, and we flowed with nature's cycles. There was no wealth to hoard, no land to conquer, and absolutely no king demanding taxes. Our greatest survival tool was our mobility.
Part 2. The Sedentary Mystery. The Sudden Stop. And this brilliantly illustrates how everything ground to a halt. Then, about 10,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period, everything changed. Look at the forensic evidence of these early homes. First, they cleared stones from the earth. Then they dug holes for wooden posts, wove bamboo mats, and plastered the walls with mud. Guys, this wasn't just about building a roof. This was the very first step in claiming ownership over a tiny piece of the earth. It was the original blueprint for permanent settlement.
And this physical change caused a massive psychological shift too. In places like the Levant, we see them abandoning natural circular huts for rigid, square, straight-walled architecture. Why does that matter? Well, square houses can be packed tightly together, wall to wall, creating dense villages. We were fundamentally changing our relationship with the earth, carving it up into private, geometric little blocks. Part 3. The Grain Trap. Cultivating control. But why did we do it? The usual story is that we just wanted a reliable food supply. But anthropologist James C. Scott has a much more intriguing and slightly sinister theory. See, there's a huge difference between a nomad's diet and a farmer's diet. Nomads relied on roots, tubers, and wild game. These are things hidden underground or constantly on the move. They're practically impossible to track. But grain? Wheat? It grows above ground, it's highly visible, and an entire field ripens at the exact same time. It can be measured, and because it can be measured, it can be taxed. Scott famously said, "The state is a recording, registering, and measuring machine." Just let that sink in for a second. Early states didn't just casually adopt agriculture, they fully backed it because keeping track of grain was the absolute best way to extract wealth. You can't really tax a hunter-gatherer, but a farmer chained to his wheat field, he's not going anywhere.
So the crucial point is that grain was essentially the ultimate currency for ancient state control. Its very biology made taxation incredibly easy. You cannot hide a field of wheat from a tax collector. It ripens predictably, it's easily divisible for accounting, it doesn't rot quickly like potatoes so it can be transported over long distances, and most importantly, it permanently anchors the farmer to that specific plot of land.
Part 4. The Organized Village. Hardening into a System. Let's move to ancient India and see how this builds into an administrative web. Take the evolution of the grama, or village. Back in the days of the Rig Veda, a grama was just a roaming band of free tribes. But as empires grew, that grama hardened into a fixed agricultural community with rigid, permanent borders. They transformed from free-roaming people into strictly defined tax-paying units. And eventually, they became specialized land grants used to expand a kingdom's power. Right at the center of this new system was the grama pojika. And no, this wasn't some democratically elected leader. This was the hereditary village headman, usually the wealthiest landowner around. He acted as the judge, the police, and the tax collector, all rolled into one. Wealth and authority were intentionally concentrated at the top to ensure the state could easily extract its revenue from the village. To tighten their grip even further, ancient empires utilized things like Brahmadeya. These were tax-free land grants given to Brahmins. From a purely administrative perspective, the state used these grants as strategic anchors. By placing educated administrators in remote countryside areas, the state could establish its authority, push agricultural expansion, and enforce a rigid, stratified social order all the way down to the village level. Part 5, the modern escape, returning to our roots. So, for thousands of years, the village was essentially an engine for taxation and state control. But here we are in the 21st century, and there's this fascinating twist. The descendants of those ancient farmers are suddenly desperate to escape megacities and their exhausting 9-to-5 jobs, to essentially build a new type of village. We're seeing digital nomad hubs popping up in places like Bali. People are building completely sustainable, zero-waste eco-villages. It's a voluntary return to intentional, smaller-scale living. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we are looking backward to move forward. Take Konoma in Nagaland, recognized as Asia's first green village. It's sustained entirely by the indigenous wisdom of the Angami tribe. They use shifting agriculture, a practice that used to be dismissed as primitive, to successfully protect their biodiversity and their community. Or look at Dayal Bog in Agra. This is a century-old ecosystem that is completely carbon-free. They rely heavily on solar power and battery-operated vehicles, totally rejecting fossil fuels. It's a prime example of a modern community intentionally disconnecting from the broader state grid to run self-sufficiently. And then there's the incredible village of pea plant tree in Rajasthan. Whenever a girl is born there, the entire village comes together to plant exactly 111 trees. They are using the traditional village structure to completely rewrite outdated social contracts, bringing dignity to women while literally building a lush, green ecosystem. When you put it all together, the contrast is night and day. The ancient village, designed 10,000 years ago, was anchored by forced labor and built to extract taxes for the state. But today's modern eco-villages, they are designed for sustainability, anchored by remote work and personal choice, and focused on communal equity. We are keeping the shell of the village, but we're stripping away the trap. Which brings us to one final, deeply profound question. When we sit behind our laptops building digital nomad hubs and eco-villages, are we just trying to undo the mistake of the Neolithic era? Is our modern urge to build these intentional communities actually the cry of our ancient nomadic souls finally trying to break free from the agricultural trap we walked into 10,000 years ago? Next time you feel the urge to pack it all up and move to the mountains, just think about that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything.